Welcome to Tycoon Talks. We are so excited to be hosting our first episode with Dani Palma from Estuary. And for those of you who don't know, Estuary is an enterprise data movement platform for real-time streaming and batch processing. I'm Chloe, your host from Database Tycoon. Database Tycoon is your partner in open source data solutions. And this is Steven, the founder and CEO of Database Tycoon. Database Tycoon provides data solutions that empower teams of all sizes to take control of their data destiny. Everything we create is designed with the power back in the hands of teams, fostering ownership, freedom, and collaboration. Today, we'll chat with Dani all about Estuary, do a deep dive examining different data tools, and investigate the latest trends in data. Dani, talk to us a bit about Estuary. Are there any recent developments or updates?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy that I can be the first guest on this amazing podcast. It's an amazing privilege. And thank you for the short summary elevator pitch of Estuary. You summarized it super eloquently, Chloe. I am currently the head of marketing for Estuary. And as you mentioned, Estuary is a data movement platform. So we are trying to solve challenges where teams and organizations have some kind of data storage or data system somewhere, and they want to activate the data essentially to solve business problems. And that usually happens in some other system. So that creates a problem of data movements.
What has been the most exciting update at Estuary in the last quarter?
Estuary is a pretty young company. It's a seed stage startup. So I think it was last year when we actually started to find both our ideal customer and both the actual challenges that we want to solve. So the last months have been about focusing and narrowing our focus on some of these areas that we really want to work on. For example, our Iceberg integration and Fabric, Microsoft Azure Fabric integration as well. And of course, change data capture, which is our way of extracting real-time data from operational databases.
And how are users responding to these new features, and what challenges are they hoping to solve?
So all of these are solving real problems, I hope, at least for a lot of customers. We see a lot of movement in the Iceberg topic. In the past few months, it's getting more and more popular. Although I kind of feel like it's a little bit overblown. It's a bit too popular for how actually useful it is. So, of course, as a small startup, our only option is to react and try to build out a good Iceberg integration, which is surprisingly technically challenging.
Can you elaborate a bit more on why you think Iceberg is getting a bit too popular?
So I think data lake houses in general, which is the overarching architecture that uses Iceberg as a component, are the next step in evolution for data storage and compute. So it used to be data warehouses for the past decade or so, being the central component in a data architecture, and that's where you store your data. That's what you use to run your analytics as well. Now, customers really want to separate compute from storage, because that's how you can optimize the most, both in performance and cost as well. And using something like Iceberg is probably so far the best way to compartmentalize the storage layer into its own little thing that you can actually use from any kind of compute. And a lot of organizations want this kind of flexibility because they don't want to be locked into just Snowflake or just Databricks. They want to use whatever is best for that specific challenge that they have.
Cool. I'd love to jump in.
Yeah, jump in.
Have you seen any examples of Iceberg being used with Estuary or use cases that customers have asked about that you could tell us about?
So our Iceberg connector is, I think, 4 months old, something like that. So it's still fairly new. It's a materialization connector, which means that we load data into Iceberg. Soon we will also build a connector that actually extracts data from Iceberg with change data capture, but it's something for Q2, I think. So yeah, we do have customers using the materialization connector, which is great because it's very complex to set it up technically. You have to care about maintenance, like compacting iceberg tables. You have to care about what catalog you use, what object storage you use. So there's still a lot of moving pieces. But we do have a few happy customers who are actually moving the most amount of data through the platform in terms of volume.
It seems like 2025 might be the year where every platform is sort of scrambling to get their iceberg support built in.
I think so, yeah. Is Database Tycoon working with Iceberg at all?
We're looking into the different catalogs that are available and trying to understand the pros and cons of work with Iceberg as the file format, and then from there using Polaris as the catalog or Unity as the catalog. We still have to decide exactly what we want to do with it. But right now at Database Tycoon, we've been looking into open source, call it a serverless stack, where we can try to use tools like DuckDB and SQL Mesh. We haven't quite reached the point of using Iceberg with this, but Iceberg would be the next addition to this stack, I believe. We can run a process that does transformations on static files in S3, and the inputs and the outputs all happen with S3 alone and the process that's running with it. So you could imagine with Iceberg on top of that, you get the benefits of, the files are already on S3. We might as well standardize it with the right layer and enrich it with all that metadata and all that state support and all those good features that come with it. So it's definitely on our roadmap over here. I just don't have a project yet I can talk about with it.
Speaking of roadmaps, Dani, can you share a bit about the roadmap for Estuary?
This year, we are planning on adding a lot of new connectors. So previously, we focused on a few core connectors like operational databases and data warehouses. But this year, we are planning on implementing more and more SaaS cloud connectors for stuff what's a good example that's not so well known, but maybe everybody kind of knows about it, like Intercom, for example. Okay, that's a pretty big example. But so like Zendesk, Intercom, stuff like that are not transactional databases, but usually, but there are some use cases where people need real-time data for those. Yeah, we are just pretty much going to be focusing on a lot of Iceberg stuff. There's a lot of improvement still that we can do there. And a lot of our customers want more and more functionality. Another big one that we're going to do is more enterprise features. So a lot of our customers have been smaller, middle-sized organizations, but recently we shipped a few features that enable us to get those deals where companies have super strict data regulatory requirements, and now we can satisfy those more and more.
I'd love to ask you a little bit about the split amongst your customers in terms of who's using the batch features and who's using the streaming features, and maybe who's using both. Because I know Estuary is primarily a CDC tool. That's your main focus, is for streaming data. I'm curious how you've seen anything perhaps change in the market. Do you find that more people are adopting streaming architectures, or are you finding that you're having to, as you mentioned, adapt more to the batch connectors and setups like that?
What doesn't make sense is to try to emphasize a unified architecture. That usually completely misses the mark. Like nobody really wants streaming and batch at the same time in one platform and combining the two. So what we will be doing this year is to kind of treat the real time and the batch or analytics product or sub-product of the platform kind of separately. And because most organizations, they either want real time or they either want batch, and they are totally fine with batch. But as for the capabilities of the platform, the two are pretty much the same. So we can extract data and refine 5 minutes from Salesforce, but internally it's treated exactly the same way as if it was like a change data capture connector. So all the representation of the data, all the functionalities are totally the same. So it's essentially up to the user what kind of latency they want. And we see that more and more people when they realize that it's just as simple to get data real time as it is every day, then they will always opt for the real time option, because data faster is always better for competitive advantage.
Yeah. I mean, I think the reason most people would stay away from it is because you're talking about building two totally separate architecture styles if you were going to build it from scratch. But if you're saying at Estuary, you've made it as easy as, pick one or pick the other, I could totally see why streaming would win out in that battle.
I feel the industry is moving towards real time, and the easier it gets and the cheaper it gets. And a good example of that is the rumor of the Red Panda acquisition that have been floating around by Snowflake. And Snowflake has generally or historically been only batch processing. They had some initiatives for real time stuff, but it never really fit into their value proposition. But I think this acquisition shows that they want to do it because it's where the growth is.
Okay. Well, what do you think this means for Snowflake?
I think for Snowflake, it means that they are on their way to compete with cloud service providers. All of their initiatives that have been coming up lately, like Snowpark container services, like running actual web applications, or the Unistore, which is kind of a fail, but I think they still are trying to make it work for like transactional database backends. To me, it signals that they want to provide a service for all areas of software, essentially, similar to what AWS or GCP is doing. And this is one puzzle in that piece. And the other thing that they want to achieve is real-time data integration for AI stuff. Like it's a very big AI play, and Red Panda has very good AI related functionality already built in. So it kind of makes sense to require. The big question is how well are they going to be able to integrate it?
We'll definitely be watching. But speaking of AI news with Snowflake, I also saw this week that they just announced they're adding DeepSeek R1 to Cortex already. So get ready for more AI updates from Snowflake, I guess.
100%. I think it's going to be more and more AI.
Yeah, I think this pivots us into the next part of our conversation, talking about tools. We can pivot into like, what are your favorites, your personal favorite tools?
I think you mentioned DuckDB when we were talking about lakehouses, Steven, and I think that's a good start for the discussion because it's one of the tools lately that I really love. I don't know what kind of use cases have you found for it yet, but I find myself using it for like ad hoc querying, CSVs, Google Sheets, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about my experience with it. As I mentioned, I've been working with the team here on a project that's generally serverless. So it only exists when it's running. So there's no spinning warehouse server. There's no Snowflake. It's just an AWS bucket on S3. So DuckDB ended up being a great fit for that project because, first of all, the support for S3, as you mentioned, is really nice. I was shocked how easy it was to just start querying tables from, or I should say querying files from S3. Once you set the credentials up, you just select star from path. It's great. So I like DuckDB for that reason. And then we ended up setting it up with SQL Mesh, and that integration is very good as well. The only thing that was missing from DuckDB and still is missing at this time is Iceberg support. And there's a issue open for it that I've now started following because I want to know when that gets solved. If DuckDB, one of the biggest, most popular query engines, can get support for Iceberg, it's going to be big news.
That's one of the weird things about Iceberg, that only Spark is pretty much the best data ingestion tool for it. For some reason, write support is just lacking everywhere else. But yeah, and I'm very curious. Is it okay if I ask some questions from Steven as well?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
I'm super curious. Cool. So I haven't been involved in the past year or so in like the analytics side that much, and I'm kind of behind on like SQL Mesh and DBT and SDF and all. Like you said that you're using SQL Mesh, and like is it better than DBT or is it not?
There are differences. I'm very happy with SQL Mesh. Probably going to be using it now for many more of my projects. I'm really impressed with the way that it can handle state and environments. So that alone is a big game changer. I remember working on plenty of DBT projects in the past where you, especially for some of the bigger data sets and bigger projects, if it takes an hour for your job to run and you need to run it in dev entirely before it finishes, and then check it, merge it, and then run it again in prod, and takes another hour, that is an expensive operation. But SQL Mesh, from what I understand about it, has set up their environments so that they're really more like virtual pointers. So the data only exists one time, and you don't have to copy it physically, even if you're making a new environment. I think that the right fit for SQL Mesh is for maybe teams that have not worked with dbt before. That's my personal opinion. Not that there aren't reasons to upgrade, but at this stage, it still feels like a very small margin of changes, especially as we were seeing dbt Labs is looking very closely to keep up with the features that SQL Mesh is putting out. So you mentioned the news about SDF Labs and Query. Basically within 24 hours of each other, they both made this announcement. And so some quick standouts to that is that they're both Rust-based tools. So it's clearly showing that both companies care about speed. So something that SQL Mesh has been, I should say Tobico has been very serious about since the beginning, is being able to take your SQL in whatever language you're writing it for, or whatever query engine, I should say, you're writing it for, being able to convert it to something else and run it there. And they even have SQL Glot, which is the standalone tool for it. Now, SDF Labs, in theory, should allow dbt to do this natively, depending on how they integrate it. Same question about Snowflake and Redpanda. What are they going to do with it now that they have it? That's the real question. So Tobico acquired Query, and they, as far as I can tell, are another transformation framework, but they were very much focused on workflows in your IDE. So within your IDE, you can preview query runs. You can do some like lightweight BI work, and it gets committed as code to your repo. So it's sort of an all-in-one package. And I think it irons out some of the areas where, if SQL Mesh has been very focused on the data mechanics, this gives them a little bit more well-rounded coverage as a product, in my opinion. But again, same question for them. Toby has written about this in blog posts, and he's committed again and again to open source, but they're building their cloud product as well. So we'll see what percentage gets merged into the open source versus the cloud. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
What I'm super curious about is what's your take on these tools having enough of a technical moat compared to Snowflake building their own transformation orchestration tool inside the platform, or BigQuery integrating Dataform natively. Is there enough of a reason to keep using SQL Mesh or dbt for that matter? Can they bring enough to the table, or should people just stick to the native tools and keep learning those? And the reason I am asking this because I see that the tools inside Snowflake and BigQuery, for example, are getting better and better. And I don't know if there is enough of a competitive advantage to using SQL Mesh anymore, because I've been out of the analytics game for a bit.
Are you saying in comparison to dbt, or just in comparison to
DBT or SQL Mesh? Like these tools are for transformation orchestration, essentially, right? And if you can do it in the warehouse natively, then why would you need another tool?
I think that the tools that already have the market share, like dbt and to some extent SQL Mesh, they've focused a lot on user experience and user interface, where I'm afraid that Snowflake and other companies like that have not put the same effort in the sense that you can go find a tutorial about how to do a transformation in Snowflake if you really want to. And Snowflake themselves have probably written it and designed it and published it for free. But I don't know about you. I don't know of anyone who's ever been comfortable with the interface. And I think that while people are still comfortable with command line tools like dbt and SQL Mesh, those are always going to win out for the usability perspective. Now, with that said, BigQuery bought Datafold a few years ago. I wouldn't be surprised if Snowflake does the same thing. I mean, who's to say dbt Labs or Tobico don't get bought by Snowflake? Like, they're building that stuff in, but I'm sure they would love to make a little targeted acquisition I'm speculating, of course, but to your point, I think that they're in the fight. I think that they will keep fighting, and they'll probably keep working on making their product. I think they'll keep focusing on making that a competitive product. I'm just skeptical about how long it's going to take for people to really adopt to it.
And it's always true that these bigger companies move slower, way slower than smaller startups. So yeah, it's probably not that straightforward to keep up with all the technical advancements.
Yeah. And returning back to kind of going on this topic of like trends in the data industry, what industry shifts do you think will have the biggest impact on data teams in the next year?
I think AI is going to have a huge impact on the analytics side of things, and then later on probably the data engineering side of things. I already see a lot of AI data analysts floating around with questionable quality, but I think as AI tools or as AI models get better and better, and AI applications get smarter as well, I don't exactly know what the shift will look like, but there's definitely going to be people moving from left to right on the value chain, from analytics to engineering, to find a new place because AI has automated a part of their job that was critical for them.
Jumping off from that question, what are some ways where AI can enhance the data pipeline? Because I'm thinking about this here as well with Database Tycoon. We're all wondering about AI, and we're all seeing all these rapid changes come out, and we're all wondering, how are these going to change our workflows and our lives, frankly? Are you seeing anything already playing out with any of your customers, or would you say people are still just sort of exploring their options?
Regarding data pipelines, I don't really see a lot of AI related enhancements so far, or use cases that actually make sense. What I see is that AI is very good to help solve issues for our end users who want to create a data pipeline, but run into some kind of issue. And that's where AI is super useful to actually help or enable them to solve the issue themselves without having to file a bug report or having to reach out to any kind of customer support. And I think that's where the best value or the biggest value is for AI. It is making the user feel smart and good about themselves, because they can just get through all of these issues themselves. As for like the generative aspect and using it to create actual pipelines, I think it works for up to a certain level of complexity, and then just completely falls apart. Yeah, sure. If you have an amazing template for a data integration script, and your source has a perfectly designed open API definition, then yeah, you can use AI to generate a DLP script, and it will probably work on the first try as well. But as soon as it gets a bit more complicated than that, then I haven't seen AI effective yet. But yeah, in the future, I think they will probably be able to do it with the help of my longer running automations like agents who are able to kick these issues themselves. So yeah, they are probably going to be able to write those pipelines themselves soon.
I'm certainly excited to see who can take advantage of this new technology of building agents and chaining agents together to make decisions. Sure, we're just months or weeks away from one of the major data platforms announcing something like that.
Probably. And is Database Tycoon utilizing AI somewhere? I assume y'all are using AI for like development workflow, but do you actually integrate it into something that you deliver to a customer?
I would say not yet. We are using it in our development workflows, or we're opting into it, I should say. I've been using Cursor and I'm enjoying it a lot. I try not to rely on any AI LLM, but I like to get advice maybe, or do discoverability from LLMs. And so that's how I've been approaching it. But in terms of actually building it into any data products, I found that it's too early. The Snowflake announcement that I mentioned today was the first thing I've really been interested in trying, which is to just get that open source model running in Snowflake. I think where I'm most excited to see the possibilities is where it can interact with the semantic layer. like tools like Cube, where could an AI-based exploration be the most useful in, I think, understanding your data, like data discoverability? Because most teams have big warehouses that are just, big sets of schemas and tables that maybe they don't have the full context on. And we all know documentation and, both writing it and finding it to read are both sort of chores at times. So anything that can be done to push that information out in a more effective way, I think is a net win for analytics teams. I just don't know if that means we need a new product to serve that purpose, or if the tools we already have can deliver on that.
Yeah, that's fair. I also love Cursor. I have to say, it's very addictive having an AI ready to use all the time.
May have been you, Dani, who actually recommended it to me at first. So thank you for that, if you did.
Oh, Dani, shifting gears back to you here. Is there anything we should be keeping an eye on in terms of Estuary? Any events, initiatives, launches coming soon?
So we're going to have a joint webinar with Coalesce, who is also a player in the data transformation scene, in addition to SQL Mesh and dbt. We'll have a nice talk about how you can build the ELT pipelines with Estuary and their tool. And other than that, I will be probably appearing as a guest at some conferences this year, like Data Council. So if anybody's there, then we have chance to say hi. We are still in the planning phase for this year, but we are planning on hosting a few events, probably on the East Coast, in New York. So yeah, follow our LinkedIn page.
Awesome.
We'll post everything there.
Where should people start if they're new to you?
Recently revamped our documentation page on the website, and now it has a better introduction to the whole platform. So if you're just getting started and have no knowledge about streaming or real time or anything like that, then I think just going from beginning in the docs is the best way to go about it. We also started putting a lot of effort into creating bite-sized tutorial videos. So our YouTube channel is a nice resource, at least up to the latest 10 videos. Before that, it's it gets kind of weird. So
Awesome.
Noted.
And where can people learn more about Estuary's work or connect with you?
We are probably the most active on LinkedIn as in terms of content that we put out. But we do have a community Slack channel with 1,000 members already active in terms of bug reports. But there are some conversations going on as well. So and the whole team is available there. So yeah, that's probably the best way to reach out.
I know we have one audience member for a Q&A, so I'm going to bring Yuki back up to the stage. All right, Yuki, do you have any questions for Dani or Steven?
So one topic came up, which was if, big vendors like Snowflake, or Databricks, if they developed tools like dbt, SQL Mesh, how that's going to change the markets. And I feel they may take over the transformation market entirely, because that's what kind of Databricks is doing. They just popped out and, started getting tractions and stuff like that. And they're also trying to get into the BI market now. And, those big companies have resources, right? SQL Mesh is really small still, but dbt is kind of getting big and has some resources to, buy, companies like HCF Labs.
Bricks announced that they raised another $10 billion this week.
I know, that's just go public so that I can buy their shares, right?
Right. But yes, they have a war chest. I mean, Snowflake too, it's about the same valuation. They're both, I think, in over $60 billion at this point. So, they'll either spend the money to build the tools in-house probably, or they'll have to eventually acquire somebody. I mean, we're seeing, the fact that dbt Labs and Tobico both made acquisitions means maybe we're heating up again in the mergers area of the data industry. We'll see.
Yeah, I think that consolidation will keep happening. And in the next couple of years, maybe Snowflake Databricks will have a competitive tool to dbt and SQL Mesh. But I hope the market will stay competitive, as in like these companies will stay as they are, not being acquired by big vendors. And I personally wished SDF Labs were not acquired by DBT, so that the market will, would be more competitive.
True.
I guess if you want to build your own Rust-based transformation orchestration tool, then now is the perfect time to do so because everybody wants one.
Yeah, or maybe 3 months ago was the perfect time.
Yeah, I guess.
Cool.
Okay, cool. So now we're at time. Dani, thank you so much for joining us here today for our first ever episode of Tycoon Talks.
Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
His contact info and all that is linked below. And if you are tuning in and looking to work with Database Tycoon, you can visit our website tagged below. Follow us LinkedIn, Threads, and Blue Sky, all linked below. So yeah, thank you guys for tuning in to the first episode of Tycoon Talks, the Open Exchange. We'll see you next time.